Hello everyone, since many of you asked, today we're gonna be going over all the builds and the DPS meta we will be using in the incoming day 1 raid, Root of Nightmares. So first of all, the team composition. We're gonna be going in with 2 Titans, 2 Warlocks and 2 Hunters. This is mainly because we just like to play our mains, so unless the meta really requires it, we're just gonna play our mains. Me and Cruz are Titan mains, Kairos and Mupol are Warlock mains, Vile and Quads are Hunter mains, so 2-2 is a pretty balanced comp. Now that said, I wouldn't suggest having more than 2 Titans because they aren't that good in boss encounters, since unless the boss can be hit by a Thunder Crash, you don't really have a damage option. So they're better in like ad clear encounters, I wouldn't use too many. Regarding Warlocks, you want at least 2, because you want at least 2 Well of Radiance available at all the time. So at least 2 Warlocks, possibly 3 Warlocks. While regarding Hunters, I think 2 Hunters is pretty good. You could also decide to run 3 Hunters if you want, because their supers are just very good with Star Eater scales. Now, let's move over to my Titan so I can show you some builds. Let's start with my Void build. This is gonna be the build that I'm gonna enter the raid with. I think it's the strongest build overall, or at least the most versatile one. On this build, I have Echo of Provision, Echo of Undermining, Echo of Remnants, and Echo of Starvation. I get melee energy on grenade hits. My grenade weakens, my grenade lasts longer, and I also get Devour on orb pickups. Now for my aspects, I run Control Demolition and Offensive Bulwark. Usually with this build you run Bastion to get your overshield when you pop the barricade. The thing is, since I am gonna be running Oil, and Oil got nerfed and doesn't give you as much class ability regeneration anymore, you don't want to use Bastion since that really hits your cooldown. So you just run the Offensive Bulwark instead. Now this doesn't really hurt you since you can just run an Hollow Denial with Repulsor Brace, and then you can use the Artifact mod for Volatile Flow on orb pickups, and basically whenever you get a kill you just get an overshield, right? So yeah, you just don't really need the Bastion for survivability. On top of that, this overshield will also proc Offensive Bulwark, which gives double grenade regen and increased melee damage. Control Demolition is very good, you know, volatile on all your abilities, healing for all your team, so very good. Obviously you want Throwing Shield to cycle Oil better, and I would say Big Barricade because I just really like the Big Barricade for cover. If you prefer the Rally Barricade, that's up to you. It obviously has a better cooldown. I just really prefer the big one when I play endgame content. Obviously Vortex Grenades, because those got crazy good since they got like a 20% buff in the latest season. So yeah, I'll show the build real quick here, just so if you want to see the mods, and then we can go over everything. Now the weapon choice is up to you. Again, I suggest Hollow Denial. You can use Eager Edge if it's an encounter where you have to move. You can use the Machine Gun with Demolitionist, Adrenaline Junkie. You can even use a Damage Loadout, so like Easy Rocket. This is really up to you. You can even use Striga. If there are overloads, you can use a Chill Clip Fusion. You can use a Blinding GL. The loadout doesn't really matter. I suggest running a Double Special because Double Special has not been fixed yet and gives you so much special ammo. But ultimately you can also run a Primary since primaries work better with Finders. There are definitely many opportunities loadout-wise. On my helmet I run one Heavy Ammo Scout, one Heavy Ammo Finder, one Void Siphon that can be changed for whatever you want really. It can even be like an access to assets. On my gloves I have Busted in Detonation to get my class ability faster when I hit targets with grenades. I have Impact Induction to get my grenade faster when I hit targets with my melee. I have Firepower. This one is very good. You make so many orbs with it. It's not really balanced. Those are new mods, so abuse them until you can. This is good for making orbs. On your chest piece, you always want one Concussive Dampener, and then you can pick the resist mods. You can even use like Harmonic since I'm playing Void right now. I would suggest having at least one Concussive and possibly at least one Void in case there are Tormentors in the raid. Even like Wyverns. Usually like enemies that hit very hard are Void enemies, so yeah. And then the third element can be up to you, either another Concussive or like you can just pick an element that's present a lot in the encounter you are currently playing. On your boots, you can have one Innervation for grenade range and orb pickups, one Absolution. The reason why I'm not running Recuperation is because I have Devour, so if I pick up an orb, I will heal no matter what. And then I have one kinetic surge because may as well make my kinetic a tiny bit better. Moving on to the class item. I have one bomber, one outreach, and one distribution. You want to cycle your abilities, so those are just very good for Earth of Most builds. Artifact mods, you can obviously run bricks from beyond, right? This gives you an heavy brick, I think every 2 yellow bar kills. So anything that's not a red bar, which is extremely strong, of course. You can also use void weapon channeling to get like a void damage boost. Now I'm not exactly sure if this mod is bugged when you also use a void font. So maybe avoid using this if you're damaging the boss with a void weapon, because I think there is something weird when this buff runs out and then you can't get void font anymore. I'm not sure, I haven't really tested, so maybe just make sure to not use like a void weapon for DPS, that's all I'm saying. You can also have prismatic transfer pretty much all the time, since that's just good. It doesn't stack, but it's still nice to have it in an encounter where you move a lot. I don't know, exhibition for example, right? You pop super and damage buff for everyone. Now, let's move on to my second build. This is a solar bonk build. As I said, I planned on mainly using void, but you never know, I may run solar. Bonk is very good when there are majors in an encounter and you want to get rid of them without wasting ammo. Also, if you want to use Eager Edge with it to move around. A good example is totems, right? In the totems encounter, you want to bonk the knights that give you the brand. You also want to go under the totem quick. You want to be able to survive, and healing nades help you on that. So in the build, I run Ember of Mercy, because gives 10 resil, which is nice. Fire Sprites grant restoration, and I mean, my Warlocks will do plenty of them, so I will be able to pick them up. And then when I revive an ally, I get restoration, which is very, very nice. Just a strong fragment overall. Ember of Torches for Radiant. Solace for Radiant and Restoration duration. And then Ashes. This is basically only for my super. I think Ember Titan, if you don't count Strand Hunter, which is bugged, is the strongest roaming super in the game. So this basically just makes your super better. You can ignite the target more. So you can change this if you want, but I think it's very strong. You run healing nades, because they're just very, very strong. When you throw them, you're basically unkillable for a bit. Again, the barricade is up to you. I will definitely use the big one on the solar because you don't need your barricade. So when you use it, may as well be good, right? You don't need to cycle it for like Earth of Most. Jump is up to you. I use Strafe all the time. Throwing Ember, Sol Invictus, Roaring Flames. Now, mod-wise, I have triple lens on since I want the most uptime as possible with my super. So you get so much super energy by getting melee kills with this. But you can also put some finders on if you want. That's kind of up to you. On my gloves, I have EV-ended to make orbs melee kills. I have Focusing Strike, so I get class ability on melees, and I have Impact Induction, so I get Grenade Energy on melees. Again, you want good uptime on your healing nade, since it's your best defensive tool, so make sure to have that. For your chest piece, it's gonna be the same thing all the time, so I'm not gonna go over every chest piece. They all have just resist mods. On my boots, I have Recuperation, because picking up an orb after a melee kill gives me a chunk of health, right? You know, sure, I heal when I hit a target with my Ember, but it's still better if I can also get a chunk of health, just to make sure. I have Innervation, Grenade Energy on orb pickups, and I have stacks on stacks. The reason why I have stacks on stacks is because currently, I don't think this is intended, but if you use stacks on stacks and you also use Empowered Finish, you get so many armor charge stacks every time you do a finisher. I think you get 3 or 4, I'm not sure. Anyways, you get enough to proc special finisher. So basically you can make a special brick every finisher you do, no matter what, like back to back. The reason why I'm doing this on Solar is because Solar does not need to cycle abilities. You just need to bonk things and then use your healing nade when you're in danger. So you don't need to like run distribution, outreach, it doesn't matter. So may as well have this build on Solar. I'm not missing out on anything, right? Now you can have this combo even on other classes. I can even have this on Void. It's just on Solar it actually does not hurt the build. On other builds it does hurt them a bit. So I would rather not do it. My teammates are probably gonna be doing this though. Weapon wise on Solar I'm using a Blinding GL because it's just very good. You can blind targets and bonk them. Again, I have a sword on now, but this can change. I've seen on my inventory, as you can see. This is not related to Solar, but Xeno is just a good weapon, something you can use. I have Tractor. You know, if you need to debuff a boss, yeah. Weapon choice is pretty much like... It's just free. You can pick whatever you want with any of those builds. They're not really... It doesn't matter what you use. You just choose depending on the encounter, okay? Now, moving on to the Arc build. This is basically a boss encounter build, mainly. I don't see myself running Arc in a puzzle encounter. If there is a boss, though, where I need to Thunder Crush for damage, or for a final stand or anything like Heroic, I have the Arc build ready. Obviously, I have the Curious swap ready, right? But I'm gonna play Art of Inmost before damage starts. On Arc, you use Nade Duration, Nade give Jolt, Recharge. Recharge gives you like a 4x regen when you're red bar, so extremely strong. I have Resistance for the 25% damage resist, Pulse Nades since they got buffed by 20%, Thruster, Shoulder Charge. I don't suggest using Ballistic Slam since in encounters where there is a relic, it can prioritize this melee and you can fall off the map, so better not to use this. You can either use Shoulder Charge or you can use Thunderclap. Kinda up to you. I like the movement on this. The aspects are like the classic one. Moving on to the mods. Again, I have a Void Siphon because I probably will use Void weapons. Although Denial is good on every class, like let's be honest. Since Volatile Flow lets you get the Overshield with Repulsor Blaze on any class, it's so good. On my gloves, I have Firepower. This build is basically the same as like the Void build, so there isn't any need of any explanation. Again, resist mods. The boots are also the same. I really don't think much changes. Yeah, this is pretty much it. Actually, the boots need the recuperation on Arc, so nice that I catch that. Better to actually overwrite the loadout. Perfect. Okay, now I have also Strand build. As I said at the start, I'm probably gonna play mainly Void. And Solar, if needed on certain encounters, Arc maybe for bosses. Strand is not something I see myself playing, but it is very strong. Cruz is probably gonna be playing Strand, he said. We still need to decide, but like it's definitely an option. One person on Strand is good. Maybe 2 people on Strand at max. I wouldn't put any more because you don't want too much CC, right? You definitely want to also kill things. Light 3.0 is like extremely strong, so too much CC doesn't do any good. Regarding fragments, I have class ability range on Suspend. This build will basically be like an upgraded version of the one I released on the previous YouTube video, since now we have the new fragments. So yeah, this one, you get like 30% class ability range on every kill. Damaging targets regenerates your grenade. This one is kinda buggy in a good sense. It works the same as supers work, like your actual super energy. So depending on the weapon and on how many targets you're hitting, you regen more energy. It doesn't matter how much damage you do. So certain weapons can kind of like abuse this system, like with fusion rifles or Osteo-Striga, you get your grenade back in seconds. It's extremely busted. Picking up an Orb grants Woman Mail, you don't really need this, but it's good. I think it's nice to have. It's not like you really need anything else anyways, but that's up to you. The grenade reloading your weapons is also solid. And then I have continuity for extending my suspend from 8 to 13 seconds, which is always nice. And yeah, shackle grenade. I can have the big shield. And yeah. Now weapons, for this build I do suggest using Striga because again it recharges your grenade so fast. On top of that, it's very good at spreading the poison on all those targets that are suspended and usually grouped up, right? I also use this LMG with Demo Adrenaline. It's just very good. This LMG though can be used even on Void. Demo Adrenaline is just very good, right? Demo is good for getting your grenade back. For reloading the LMG, you get the damage buff with the Adrenaline Junkie, like... It's just solid. You don't have to run this again. You can run... I don't know if I would run Eager Edge on a Strand build, but you can even run like a Linear, you can even run like a Rocket. That's really up to you. I also have this very nice fusion with Lead from Gold Demo. A very nice weapon overall. Moving on to the mods. Again, very similar to the Void build. There are some variations in this one. I have double impact induction because I really only care about getting my nade back. I don't care about my melee too much. And I don't have anything to make orbs with melee grenades because the grenade doesn't really do damage while the melee isn't very strong. Then this one, yeah, class ability energy with grenade hits, chest piece for resist. I use the new boots Abeyant Lip. You can also use oil, it's up to you. I think the boots are better, not for the primary effect, which, you know, 3 waves of your barricade, it's good, but the secondary effect is extremely strong. You gain woven mail when suspending a target. This works also with your grenade. So this is like crazy good. Remember, woven mail is a 60% damage resist. So something you don't want to sleep on. It also stacks with all the other DR sources. So yeah, it's just busted. Those boots are very, very good. I suggest using those. Anyways, it's not like you need there to be most on strand. The fragments are like so good. Like you get your grenade back so fast. And ultimately your grenade is what you really need. On top of that, Earth of Inmost buffs the damage of your grenade. And you don't need that, right? You just use your grenade to suspend targets. The super is also solid on Titan. It's obviously better with Synthos because Synthos buffs super damage by 50%, but even without it's like a solid super for sure. On the class item, I have double bomber. Again, I only want my nade back, not the rest, and I have 1 distribution. Yeah, something worth mentioning for the strand build is that the artifact mods are actually very strong for it. This one increases the range and damage of the Tangle Explosion when you shoot it with a strand weapon. This one suspends every target that gets hit by the Tangle Explosion. So this one paired with this other one makes the explosion bigger and it suspends everything. So you can suspend entire rooms, which is very, very good and really enhances this build. Now the thing is you have to use a strand weapon, which there aren't many. You can either use the Neomuna machine gun, can get also demo, or you can use the Neomuna SMG. It's kind of up to you. You don't have to use strand weapons, and you don't have to use those artifact mods. I want to point this out. You can very easily just use void weapons in case you want to play a strand build, simply because the mods for void weapons also work on other subclasses. But yeah, that's just like an option. In case you want to, there is a way to enhance your tangles. Okay, that was it for the Titan builds. Now we're gonna be moving over to the Warlock and Hunter ones.
Okay, so the main exotics that I plan on bringing in are Starfire. This one's, you know, it's just a given. This is probably the best Warlock exotic in the game right now. I also have a Phoenix loadout set up, but I don't expect to use this because double Ash's assets with Starfire may as well be Phoenix Protocol on crack. I have a Boots of the Assembler and Lunafaction setups that I have just in case. I don't really expect to be using these very much at all. Boots the Assembler in the case of something like Rolk, where, you know, you want a damage buff, but you still want to be mobile. And then Lunafactions in the event that we have to be completely immobile and you can stand still and just rocket dump or something. I have a Transversive setup too. This is just for transitions or if I don't need another exotic at a time. Whatever. I don't plan on using this in actual encounters, but it's there. To talk about Starfire, I'm using double Ashes to assets on Arc Siphon. I pretty much just plan on being an orb battery for the rest of the team. I'm going to nuke rooms, I'm going to make a shit ton of orbs, and that's my job. I'm going to spam well. Shit's broken. You'll notice that all of my loadouts have like a green counterpart. I'm using stacks on stacks with double empowered finish and special finisher. This lets you chain infinite special finishers. These are mostly there just to swap to for damage phases or something. Phoenix setup is also using double Ashes assets. Again, you know, I probably won't be using this because Starfire is just better Phoenix, but it's there. Assembler setup, actually, under the presumption that I'm going to be using a primary, because I imagine if I'm using this, then the earlier phase before the boss is actually somewhat slow, or at least difficult in some sense. So I'll be able to make a lot of ammo here. With these, since I want to be wearing these boots during DPS, I've set them up so that the special finisher loadout is like the main one, and then I'll swap to Arc Surges, because I mostly plan on using Hothead, but that's pretty much it. I mean,
let's say that you are using 3 Arc Surges because you are the one that's gonna do Widow or the Rocket spam, so that's why you use triple Arc Surge.
Yeah, which actually In regards to the Starfire build, I'm not even actually, like, I don't have a loadout for it. I'm just swapping the boots because scavengers are too important to me. But, yeah. It's, that encompasses pretty much everything. I have this empty loadout here because mods are broken. Whenever you die and respawn, your mods all break. So, like, loaders, scavengers, finders. But if you have an empty loadout, and you just quickly swap to it and swap back, then all of your mods are fixed again.
Show your fragments real quick, then I think that's it.
My fragments for Starfire are all based around my grenade and Scorch. Picking up a fire sprite grants restoration, killing an enemy that's Scorch drops the fire sprite. This one's just for Radiant, in case there's barriers, and because Radiant's just good. And then Ember of Ashes is mandatory on Starfire because it just stacks up more ignitions. I think I have the same fragments on Phoenix. I didn't want to change my fragments around too much because I plan on swapping loadouts a lot, and if you swap fragments, then you lose your super. So yeah, the same fragments are being ran on Phoenix. I'm just using Healing Rift instead of an Empowering Rift. The same goes for Boots of the Assembler. I have Empowering Rift and Healing Nade, but fragments stayed the same. And same goes for Lunas. I have a Healing Rift and Fusion Nades, but fragments stayed the same.
Good,
That's
thanks.
yep, it's pretty much everything. Not very organized, but you know.
It works.
Okay. So basically, most of these are pretty identical, except for the subclass changes. So I'll just start on this one, which ironically, I don't really plan on using that much. But basically, the fragments, or I plan on mostly playing Void, Solar, the entire raid, and the fragments won't change, just to make sure, like I'm swapping between subclasses, you don't lose abilities or supers or anything, right? So for Void, I'm running Stylish because of the volatile rounds you have 24/7, and then Vanishing Step for the extra fragment slots. Then I have Starvation, which is just Devour on Orb pickup. I don't even know how to say this, but this is the one that creates Void breaches when you kill a volatile target, and also when you finish something, it makes things around it volatile. Void breaches are pretty good on Hunter since you have to run kind of low mobility because you need resil and recovery. This kind of helps make up for that. I use Obscurity, which guarantees you invis when you finish her, and it gives you 10 recuv, so I use it for the stats and because it's kind of a nice get out of jail free card. It can proc, if you are using your Falcons, it can proc your Falcon as well. And it, it synergizes with this one pretty well. And then I use Reprisal, which is, this is increased super regen if you kill stuff while you're surrounded. I may swap this one out over to the debuff nades. Kind of depends. I haven't decided on that one way or another yet. But they're both pretty good. Yeah, as for the mods, pretty much Hunter stat line, you kind of want to line up with these top three. So around 50, 60 mobility would be nice. 100 resil, you can drop to 90, I think, can be okay since it's only -3 this season. But you're, what, at 27% instead of 30. But I'd still prefer running 100. Then you kind of want 70 recuv at least. This feels much better than running like anything less. The more recuv, the better, I'd say. Mobility on Void, if you can get to 6, then that's good too. But definitely if you're playing Solar, you don't need this, and I'll talk about why. As for the mods themselves, so this is kind of just like the ad clear playing the game stuff. So I'm running Heavy Ammo Finder and Heavy Ammo Scout just for everybody else. You could run Ashes to Assets here, or Ashes to Ashes, whatever it's called. Also to help with your super, I usually don't. You don't really need it if you're running O-Rigs, which I plan on using a lot. Void Siphon to make orbs. On my boots, I'm just running double recoup for now, just because I don't want to use armor charges on anything other than special finisher. If this finisher crap gets nerfed tomorrow or disabled or whatever, then I'd probably run a Void Surge here or something. And then, yeah, just a normal scav. I think recoup's pretty important. It helps make up with the low recovery. On to arms, I run firepower just because I always like to have at least 2 ways to make to make orbs per class, so the melee is pretty worthless on Void Hunter, so just use the nade to create one. Bolstering helps with your dodge cooldown, because if you throw a nade and damage through nade, you get some class ability back, so I run that. And then I run a Void Loader, just because it's nice. And then class item, like I said, I'm doing the Empowered Finish stuff for Special Finisher. If this gets changed, then I'd probably run a Reaping here, and you could also run a Utility Kickstart is pretty good. But for now, I think this is just too good to not use. And then Chest Piece, I just put on the resists that you think are going to be in the raid. So right now, all of these are running just one concussive, one solar, one void, and change it as needed for the encounters. So yeah, that's void. This is the exact same setup, but it's just with Aeons, in case we need finishers for anything. This is the same setup again, but with O-rigs. And then this one is basically the same setup, but for DPS instead. So here, just Helmet and Sev Scout, I'm running Powerful Friends to help make sure people stay charged. I have my Surges on my boots instead of anything. Some Dexterities for swaps, and then Dilations to make that longer. So that's it for Void. Solar is pretty similar, so I'll go over the fragments in a second. But for the mods, the boots and helmet are all the same. The only thing, and the class item and chest, the only thing that changes is the arms, where I run heavy-handed to make the orbs instead, and then I do impact induction, because here you want to have basically your healing nade as much as possible. So this is, I believe, as long as I have the right one on, should be, yeah, damage with your melee attack reduces grenade cooldown. So you're gonna be using this all the time, or using your melee all the time on Solar Hunter. Obviously this is Assassin's Cowl. Assassins is like the best neutral game exotic for day ones, I think, or anything hard on Hunter, especially on Solar, because you can just keep yourself alive forever. So on to the fragments, it's actually easier to do here. So I use fan knives just because they're very easy to use. They do a good amount of damage, and they always apply Scorch. I use healing nades just because they're basically broken. They're like way too strong and you're invincible with them. If I really didn't want to use these, I'd probably use thermites. I think thermites are pretty strong, and the Scorch synergizes pretty well with everything else. Fragments, I use class ability recharges faster when you Scorch targets. This is why Solar doesn't really care as much about mobility as Void. This, like, you pretty much always have your dodge as long as you don't lose your knives when you're doing this. I think 2, if you're running 5 mobility and probably 4 as well, 2 knife throws on 2 different targets will basically give you your full class ability back. So it's pretty good. This is just making you radiant and you lose 10 discipline. It's basically a no-brainer. It's pretty much always should run this on Hunter. This one gives you melee ability back, or melee regeneration when you kill something that's Scorched. So this is kind of a get out of jail free card in case you screw up your knives and you don't have your gamblers for some reason. On top of that, it also gives you 10 recovery, which is really nice on Hunter since they're starved for stats. And it creates a fire sprite, which gives you nade energy now, which is really good. This one, Ember of Mercy, is new, which gives you restoration. I think it's like 2 seconds base, like 3 or 4 or something with the next fragment. I forget exactly. But anyways, pretty much gives you a full heal on picking up a fire sprite, which is broken. And it gives you plus 10 resil, which is also super nice. And then the final one is just increasing the duration of these effects. And then, yeah, the fragments I run, knock them down, and on your mark. On your mark gives you so many slots and is just, like, it just makes playing Solar Hunter feel really good in terms of handling and stuff. And then knock them down for the regenning your knife when you kill radiant stuff with your melee. So you can chain the knives forever. So yeah, outside of that, then it's just the different exotics here. So this is the Assassin's Cowl, like I mentioned. This one is just basically the same DPS setup as the Void had, but with Nighthawk. Then I have a Star Eaters with same build as the Assassin's Cowl, but just with Star Eaters, and Star Eaters for DPS. So basically these 3 are my DPS setup. These are just playing the game setup. Then I have a Strand one, which is basically the same. This is just all in hopes that Strand, the super doesn't get nerfed. I think if the super gets nerfed, I don't think you play Strand Hunter. I think Strand Hunter is just better. And they do the same thing. But for the fragments, I use the suspended grants class ability back. Destroying Tangle gives you melee energy. Picking up an orb creates Woven Mail, and then the reloading from using your grapple nade. This one I would probably trade for the grenade energy regen. I think that's better. And your Hunter melee isn't that great anyways, to be honest.
I think you kind of want to run the nade regen and the suspend duration, no? I don't know.
And duration you can get away with.
Yeah, I guess.
But I think you have to use this on Hunter. Otherwise, why are you playing Hunter, right?
I guess, yes. It's fair. If it's not fixed, yeah, sure.
Yeah, like you said, if this goes away, then I get rid of this. I probably do duration and I do the grenade energy for sure.
I'll say probably grenade energy over melee anyways. I don't think the melee is like that crazy to justify that.
No, it's not. Not at all. Yeah. It's just right now, so this is the only class I use marksman dodge on, just because you don't dodge on Strand. You're always using your slam, so it's a shorter cooldown, and you don't really have another way of getting your melee back other than catching it, but like that at max gets you 90%.
I guess though, so the good point is that if you don't like actually use a grenade, but you just have a grapple for a reload, then that's also true that you don't need the grenade energy, I guess.
Exactly. And on top of this, like I don't have this set up here because like I said, I don't use anything that eats armor charges other than finishers for the day one. But if this changes, then I would probably run some firepower mods here because you can just infinitely get your nade back, assuming that's not fixed, right? Which makes it a little less important on Strand. So yeah, that's basically it. I think I have this setup, which is just empty mods to be able to swap back and forth from. And then for stasis, if I need to use it for anything, I would just go to my Assassin's Cowl build and then swap it to stasis and like fix the mods, probably swap in mobility for Rezil to get there. And just a quick little overview. I use Shroud and Grim Harvest. Other people probably prefer the grenade one. I really, really like Shroud. I can't play stasis without this, so I use it all the time. Then I use Hedrons for to get all of your stats, because Hunter is stat starved. This will make sure you're always at 100 in your top 3. Duration, make your slows last longer is pretty important. Refraction gives you class ability energy back when you're killing slowed stuff, which you're doing all the time with your dodge and your melee and grenade. This one reloads all of your weapons when you throw a stasis melee. It's basically a must-have on Hunter. And then chains for the stats and damage resist. And then finally, same boat with, if I was to play Arc for whatever reason, I would just use the Star Eater setup. Go to Arc. I think in a day one, you always use Flow State. This is pretty much the best one. I don't think you should be doing the combination blow stacking in a day one, to be honest with you, because you're going to be competing with kills so much that you probably aren't going to get this rolling. So I would just use Tempest Strike to just add more jolts around or whatever. And then the fragments I have, this is just for stats. You probably don't really need it, to be honest. It's not that great. This Orbs one is really good with Star Eaters, just because you can proc this on cooldown, and it just helps you get your super back, which is pretty much the only reason why you would play Arc. Surrounded gives you damage resist, is broken. And then Jolting on your grenades is also broken. So that's what I would run there. And then I would use, heavy-handed to make the orbs, so.
Just one question. Why, is Gear Falcons the only option on Void? You don't really need it since you have the seasonal mod, right?
Yeah, no, that's why I think you just use O-Rigs pretty much the whole time, right? Right now I'm on Big Tether, pretty much for puzzle encounters and not. And if you use Big Tether with O-Rigs and this, you spam supers, you'll have them all the time. There's not really that many great options. Whoops.
Are Frosties bad on Void? I've never even really tried them. I'm not sure.
Frosties are just bad. If you're using Frosties, you should just use O-Rigs.
Fair.
This isn't bad, but again, it's not that helpful. I think spamming tethers is more important than that. Aeons is good. Omni isn't bad, but it requires you to use the nade, and personally, I just don't like it that much.
Fair. I just a lack of better options, I see. I just wanted to ask. Yeah. Cool.
I think that's it.
Thanks. Since many of you are also rightfully curious about that, let's also discuss a bit the damage meta. It's actually pretty simple this season. Since linears got a 15% nerf, you actually just want to use Easy Rocket for pretty much anything. So you use Izanagi and a rocket with auto-loading and then a damage perk. Damage perks can be Explosive Light. Explosive Light is very good. The issue is that if you die, you lose stacks, and you also usually have 9 rockets due to reserves, but Explosive only holds 6 stacks, so you need to get some orbs mid-damage phase, which can be sketchy. But anyways, it's one of the best perks for rockets. You have Lasting Impression, which is good. Pretty much the same damage as Explosive when paired with Gully. The thing is, when you use Lasting, it's just worse to use in general, and there is a risk of missing your last rocket, so that's a trade-off you have to consider. Other damage perks, if you don't have Hothead, you can use Bump in the Night with like Frenzy. I would not suggest Vorpal, because Vorpal goes away when you swap weapons, so you're basically just wasting your damage perk. One person can use Chill Clip, and it shouldn't really be like a big damage loss. Just one person though, because it doesn't scale very well. Of course, when you use Easy Rocket, one person on your team needs to use Gallahorn, since that gives Wolfpack rounds to everyone. The thing is, Gallahorn can go to everyone. I would suggest giving it to a Warlock with Starfire, because they can just fire some Gallahorn and also throw some grenades in between. And that doesn't really drop their damage too much, since Starfire is just really good and kinda makes up for them having to run a Gallahorn. Now, other things that are worth mentioning. Linears are still good, so if there is an encounter that like the damage phase is very long, like 30-35 seconds, you can use a linear. Cataclysmic is still very good, of course, 4 times bait and switch. You can also use Taipan in case you don't want to risk proccing bait and switch in a day 1, because it can be a bit sketchy. A Taipan with triple tap firing line will do for sure. Yeah, other options worth mentioning are Sleeper. Sleeper is actually better than other linears for burst damage now, since it didn't get the nerf. I wouldn't use Sleeper though, unless the damage phase is like, I don't know. I'll say use Sleeper if the damage phase is max 20 seconds, because otherwise you're just gonna run out of ammo, right? And if you run out of ammo, then what's the point? You're not gonna do any damage after. Of course, in any damage build you use, try to use reserves and rally with reserves before the encounter starts, right? Or anyways, after a damage phase, you swap to reserves on your armor, and then you pick up ammo to fill your heavy or special or whatever you want to fill. With Easy Rocket, I suggest just rallying on reserves for rockets, so you can get 8, 9 rockets, even 10 if you can swap to fill prep on the rocket. I can, for example, here I think, I can just swap to fill prep, I rally with triple reserves, I get 10 rockets, then I swap back to demo. I'm not gonna use demo myself, because I'm not a Warlock. This is a rocket that you use on Warlock, right? Anyways, worth keeping in mind, you can use reserves. I also suggest using a secondary special, like another special weapon, when you use Easy Rocket. If you can swap to it, of course, right? Because if you can, it's just good. Your Easy will run out of ammo after 6 shots, so if after you're still doing damage, you can just use another special. Fusion rifles are good for this, right? They're solid damage, they're very easy to use. I have this one, Lead from Gold demo. I'm thinking of using this one because if I use Easy and Rocket, it's arc, so it gets font from the rocket. Something I should point out is the reason why I use 2 fonts, arc, and 1 kinetic is because with Easy Rocket, that's just the best distribution. Doing 17% more damage on your rocket and 10% more on your Easy is the best, since surges go 10, 17, and 22 when you stack them. Also, I should have mentioned before, but while my Void build doesn't have free fonts, right? Even my Arc one doesn't, but those are ready for me to swap to another pair of boots, right? I will just swap to another pair of boots that has free fonts, or like surges, how they're called now. So like this build, for example, is basically the same build as the Void one, just with surges, right? I have surges on this one, 2 arc, 1 kinetic, and I have an elemental time dilation, because you may as well make your armor charge last longer. This makes it 15 seconds instead of 10 for each stack, so that's good. So yeah, other things worth mentioning for damage is Warlocks. One Warlock can use Widowed and a rocket. Widowed rocket is extremely good. It outputs around 50% more DPS than Easy Rocket. The rotation is basically Widowed, rocket, grenade, rocket, grenade, reload. Rocket, grenade, reload. That's the first rotation, then you just widoward again and do rocket, grenade, reload. Or widoward, rocket, grenade, reload. And you keep doing this until you're out of ammo. In like 20 seconds you're gonna be out of ammo, but the DPS is absurd. So something to keep in mind for your Warlocks. I only suggest one Warlocks to do it, because only one Warlock can stick the widower to the boss. I wouldn't do it on the ground because it lasts for less on the ground. If the second Warlock wants to use Starfire though, they can do so by using Anarchy and a Succession with Demo and Firing Line. If you have that, that's very good. So you never reload your sniper, basically, you just stick the Anarchy and start shooting your sniper while throwing grenades. It does slightly more DPS than Easy Rocket, actually. Obviously the downside is that you are stationary while doing it, so you can't do it on every boss. Think about like Rolk Day 1, that would have been pretty hard to do, right? Now, worth mentioning is Divinity still on the table. If a boss is hard to hit, definitely use Divinity. That is always a solid option. It also does the 15% debuff, so you don't even have to worry about throwing like weakened nades and stuff like that. We should also talk about like ways to debuff bosses, right? The main two ways are Tractor Cannon if the boss is close, and Tether. Tether is the more realistic one. Like, we're probably gonna use 1 or 2 tethers in our team depending on the boss encounter. It's just an easy way to get the 30%, especially now that Tether got buffed to 12 seconds instead of 8. Or you can use the multi-tether and like space them out. So yeah, debuffing a boss is important. That said though, you don't have to use Tether. I'm sure you can beat bosses by just using weakened nades and just playing with the 15% debuff. So it's kinda up to you, right? Because of course if you use Tether on Hunter, you give up a damage super. And Hunter's damage supers are very good. So that's like a call you just have to make on the fly. Last thing I want to mention is, you guys are probably curious why I'm not mentioning GLs. And that's because they are slightly more DPS than Easy Rocket, but they require you to have Explosive Light on all your shots, which is something that I don't consider very realistic in a day 1 scenario. Like, imagine trying to have Explosive Light on 18 GL bullets. Considering the fact that you can also grab orbs with full super in the new system, right? So that will be like so hard. Just not worth the risk. It's just too hard, really. The damage gain is not that big. I guess the main damage gain is if everyone uses easy GL, you're not running a Gallhorn, and since Gallhorn does a bit less damage, that's like a trade-off, but I still wouldn't suggest it at all, really. Especially since GLs are also harder to use. It's an harder rotation to do. I guess it's a bit easier if you have the new crafted GL, the Void one, since it has enhanced auto-loading. That definitely makes like your rotation a bit easier, since you don't have to think about how quickly you swap weapon. But that said, I just personally wouldn't use them. They're also like, if the boss moves, they're also harder to use, so something to keep in mind for sure. Last honorable mention, rockets, you want to be using one that's adaptive or aggressive frame, since they do 10% more damage than the high impact frames. You don't want to be using the tracking ones, so the precision ones like Palmyra, because they do 10% less than high impact ones, which results in like 22% less than like adaptive or aggressive frames. So you're basically losing 22% damage by using a Palmyra. You're basically just losing the damage perk. Now, a point that can be made is, what if the boss moves like War Priest that like strafes and it's hard to hit rockets? Well, in that case, you either use linears, or if you still want to use rockets, which is slightly better, even if you have a tracking one, I would suggest, if you have it, or if you want to get it, you still have 1 day, you can get an Apex Predator from Last Wish, which is an, it's the good frame, right? So it does good damage, and you can get auto-loading and tracking on it. It basically will end up doing the same damage as an Explosive Light Palmyra with auto-loading, but it will not require you to grab orbs for Explosive Light. So it's like, it's worth having that, or if you really want to use a tracking rocket. But again, if there is a situation like that, you can probably get away with using like a linear or sleeper. Like, it will be fine, really. And I think that's pretty much it for the damage meta. It's overall very simple. Just use Easy Rocket, use a Galley, try to keep some debuff on the boss, possibly with a tether, otherwise some weaken. If the boss is hard to hit, use a div, otherwise no. And use damage supers, yeah. Titan has Thunder Crush, Hunters have many good damage supers. They have Goldie with Nighthawk, they have Blade Barrage with Star Eaters, they have Gathering Storm with Star Eaters. They even have a new Strand Roaming Super, which is currently bugged and doing absurd damage, but that will probably get fixed. So yeah, just this is pretty much it. If you guys have any questions, just feel free to ask in the comments. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.